All right. Okay, so we're in February, and it's kind of dreary and rainy and cold. And for a lot of people, like when I ask around communities and stuff, and when I talk to people on these calls, it's a lot of people say this is kind of a tough month for them. And somebody called it the winter doldrums. And past few years, I've generally held that. I've noticed that every year, come February, I'm just ready to throw my kids back in school, and I'm ready to quit. I want to do anything but keep going during February. The past couple of years, I've been I think I read a devotion that kind of changed my perspective on that. And it said, so January is a really good opportunity for rest. And God incorporates rest into everything. We have our Sabbath days, but there's also a Sabbath season. And so when you get January and February, you don't have to mow the grass. I don't have to do outdoor maintenance. And it really is kind of a nice season to, cuddle up with a book and just kind of focus on your kids. And a lot of people aren't doing as many activities. And so if we kind of look at this period as a restful period, it can be more restorative to us instead of feeling like it needs to compete with spring. And we're all eager to get to April and May, where all the flowers start pushing out and we can start getting back to our usual social activities and whatnot. But if you look at nature, a lot of the preparation for those months begins in February and in March. And the plants start doing preparations down in the roots, and there's different metabolism changes that are happening inside the plant to get ready for March and April and May. And if we didn't have February and early March, if we didn't have those seasons, you would get no spring flowers. So in the same way, the kind of preparations that we do right now helps us get ready for the coming seasons of finishing up strong for our homeschooling year and also preparing for next year. So right now we're kind of doing some investment in getting ready for what's going to be coming next August when we start our new challenge levels. So so we're doing challenge 4 today. And the theme for challenge 4 is understanding consequences defines good leadership. All right, so I think we kind of all know each other on this call, but let's see, Jennifer, you want to just go through how many years you've been homeschooling, number of years in CC, your location, and what brings you on the call today?
Okay, homeschooling for 20 years. In CC, this is my 11th year. And I've directed every year that I've been in CC.
Oh, wow.
Um, Foundations, Essentials, and most of the challenge levels. And so I am on the call because this will be my first year directing Challenge 4, and I would just kind of like a refresher.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for all those years of directing. That's impressive. That's good to hear that. Well, you guys know me. I'm Krista Bottomley, and I'm the new book rep for the state of Kentucky. We moved here we've been in several states. We've been in Kentucky for 3 or 4 years. No, 5 years now, but we've came from Pennsylvania and Ohio and Virginia in the DC area and Maryland and a few other states. But we're loving Kentucky. So these are my kids. My oldest, leaning on my youngest, is Reagan, and she is a Challenge 4 graduate, and she is doing well in college. She goes to a classical school out there and is very happy out in Annapolis, Maryland. And then I have Sebastian, who is in Challenge A, and then Ransom, who is he's his 3rd year Essentials. And then my little Frederick, he is 7. And so I'm spanning quite a few different levels. So I'm hoping that kind of keeps me sober on what it's like from the parent's perspective so that I can kind of try to assist as a book rep, assist families. Oh, so we've been homeschooling. I count from birth partly because it just makes it easy to count. So Reagan's 22, so I say we've been homeschooling 22 years, but I guess technically it would be like 17 years if you start from kindergarten. And we've been in CC since 2011. And I've directed here and there, tutored, a little when I started, but I really, book repping's kind of my heart and soul. So, Carolyn, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Carolyn Underwood. I'm a member of the Danville community and the Lexington Tuesday community. I've been homeschooling uh, about 17 years. Both my children have graduated out of the program. That's my husband, Byron, my son, Michael, and my daughter-in-law, Julia, when they graduated from U Pike. And then I have another daughter who's married, and she lives in Georgia with her husband, Joel, and they graduated from Covenant.
Oh, Covenant in Lookout Mountain.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I went there for a year. I couldn't stick it out. The tuition was just I needed to find something more affordable for me. But yeah, I love Covenant. I didn't know that. So, hello, Wendy. How are you?
I am so sorry. I am late.
Oh no, that's okay. We're just running through introductions. Do you mind being put out on the spot and telling us how many years you've been homeschooling, how many years with CC, where you're from, and what brings you on the call today?
Yeah, sure. Wendy Rice. I am been doing CC for 9 years, and homeschooling 11. My oldest will be in Challenge 4 next year, and I have acted directing foundations and essentials for the past 6 years, and next year was supposed to be my year off to celebrate Mason's senior year, and he asked me to direct his class. And
Oh.
so I thought, if my 16-year-old wants me to spend his senior year with him, how can I say no? So, anyway, so I'm jumping from FE to Challenge 4.
There you go.
So,
yeah, you'll bookends.
So now I need all the help I can get. So that's why I'm on this call.
Okay. All right. And then what location are you at?
Oh, sorry. I am going to be at Louisville Central Louisville. I can't remember which way.
Yeah, Central. Yeah, we're at Central. So wait, are you changing campuses? Because where were you F&E?
I was the FE. I am the FE director at J-Town in Louisville.
Okay.
On Fridays, but I have 2 boys, and so my younger son will be in his last year of FE next year.
Okay.
And so we're just gonna finish, I'm gonna be split. I'm gonna do both campuses next year. So.
Okay. Cool. Well, it's ambitious. So, well, hopefully Carolyn can reassure you. She was just talking about how directing Challenge 4 is easier than the other levels. So, so hopefully she can offer you some reassurance on that. So, all right. So, so this is our meeting agenda. We're gonna, the greeting and introductions we're mostly done with, and then I'm gonna run through. We're all kind of veterans, but it's good to kind of do a quick classical model refresher. Wendy, we are recording this call for anybody who wanted to see, who doesn't make it to the meeting. And so I figure if this goes out, it's good for, as much as we can say the classical model to people, it's always good for people to have a reminder. And it's good for me to practice saying it too. Then we're going to do about 20 minutes with a director's perspective. And then we don't have a student on this call. So we won't have that for this one, but then I'll run through about 15 minutes. I think last time it was less than that of, my perspective as a book rep, and then there'll be a Q&A time. So, see, Jennifer, would you mind praying for us?
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to come together with other homeschool parents and directors, and Lord, give us wisdom as we talk today, and help us to be refreshed in this time of learning together. We love you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. So we're going to go through the classical model really quick. So I pulled these images from that little book, Classical Education Made Approachable. It used to be used to see that a lot more in communities than I have lately, but this used to be kind of, does everybody remember that little book? It's like a little yellow book, very thin. That used to get passed around a lot of communities. Um, so we look at modern education. It says that modern education is mostly based on humanism, and says that man is the measure of all things. So of course they place the student at the center of his own world, as if at the center of his own world, as if each student is his own little demigod, with each isolated subject orbiting around the student. Subjects are disconnected islands of information to be studied with no real relationship to each other. And subjects are more to be harnessed for the student to use for his own benefit. And then you get to a poor Christian education. They basically just tack on a Bible study program, or, basically just Bible study is just one more subject. But the subjects are all still disconnected, and the student is still at the center of his own world. Now, a good Christian education rightfully places God at the center, recognizing that man is not the measure of all things, God is. A good Christian education recognizes that all the subjects come from the mind of God. And now great Christian education says that since all the subjects come from the mind of God, they also reflect the mind of God and reflect his character and his divine attributes in each one of those. So the Bible tells us that since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. And when you get to a classical Christian education, this is where things start to get fun to me. And that would say that since God created the universe, not a multiverse, each subject is part of an overall view of the mind of God. And each subject has a pull or influence on the rest, just as objects ordering a greater object also influence one another in their orbits. You can't truly study anything without branching out to other fields, and all of them tell us something about our Creator. So, for example, fine arts, I love that, especially in CC, we talk about how fine arts are just a reflection of the philosophy of the artist, but it also tells us something about the history of that time period and what's come before. And then science as well, or politics is greatly influenced by what people think about science, about the scientific world. So all the subjects interplay with each other and all reflect the truth from God's mind. And we have the catechesis wheel. This has only been around for a few years, at least in my memory. I didn't notice it, I think, until maybe like 5 years ago, showing up in the catalog and such. And it took me a little bit to understand. At the top there, it says doxology. And I was like, doxology, what is that? What is Lee Borton's getting at with that? And so when I looked it up, doxology means echoing and celebration. And at the same time, my daughter was getting more into understanding musical theory. And I had not had much musical training at that time and didn't really know much about it. But there was some point in there where she was like, "Mom, did you know this thing about the piano?" And she opened up the piano and she says, "When I hit a key note," and she slammed the key, the C key. She's like, "Look, each one of those strings in the piano that also are a C string are all vibrating when I hit that C." And then she hit the damper pedal, and then she did the same thing with the D. And not all of the strings, just the Ds also, even though she hadn't hit the key for those, because she had hit the D note, it made the other D notes resonate. And then she went and got her violin, and she played, and she's like, "Now watch this." And she drew a really loud, hard note across, and she's like, look at what's vibrating in there now. I don't remember what key it was, but she's like, that's resonance, and God kind of designed music to work that way. And there's scientific reasons that she's learning about in college now, a little bit more about sound waves and things like that, and that kind of plays into it. But all that is to say, there's something about that resonance with music. There's some truth of that in what we see when we study our subjects or our different strands in CC. When we encounter something that reflects the mind of God, I feel like there's this like resonance in us of truth that it's almost like vibrating, because we hear something of the image of God in each one of the things that we're studying. So when we're looking at logic, we're seeing something about God. And when we go through history and we see certain patterns repeating themselves, or when we're learning the order in the Latin language, or we're translating things from Virgil or like in poetry, the things that we see there, there's a little resonance there whenever we see the mind of God. And I don't know if it's like that for unbelievers, but that's a big part of why I love CC so much, is that is when we study, we're looking for the reflection of God in what we study. So I'm going to hit through the classical model of how we learn them really quick. So when students are really young, they are mostly just soaking up the knowledge and information and facts. My kids are in Trail Life right now, which is a scouting program. They're all learning their knots, and my boys are all at different, or kind of at different levels from each other of their understanding. So my little Frederick, who's 7, he is learning just what the names of the knots. He's learning about a granny knot and a square knot and a bowline hitch, and I don't know all the knots, but I think there's like 12 of them, and he's learning how to tie them and what they are. But then my older students, he's really just learning the grammar of the subject that he's learning. Then my older 2 students, they're working on their understanding, where they understand when to use. Why is it when I use a granny knot to tie my shoelaces, it comes untied, but a square knot will stay? But they're learning, well, if I use a square knot to drag a log along the ground, no, that shears it, that will shear off that knot, and I really need to use a bowline hitch. So they're wrestling with, when do I apply the different things that I've learned? And that's called the dialectic stage. Now, the older students that are beyond them, that are helping to teach them, they're in the rhetorical stage, and they're starting to bear fruit in wisdom. And they have projects like they have to build a fort with only rope and whatever they find in the woods. And they are also showing, when my students have to set up a tent on our camping trips, they go around, they say, hey, now you want to use this knot when you do your rain fly for those, the strings that I forget what they're called, outriggers or something like that. And so they're starting to teach other students how to apply the stuff, and they're actually bearing fruit with what they've learned. And that's the rhetorical stage. So, but in the same way that we learn any specific subject through, and we follow that progression, grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric, we also see that reflects the natural development that children go through as they're growing older. So young children, they are naturally in what we call this pulpare stage, and they're going to, as they're absorbing lots of information, they are soaking up everything they can. Now, they could absorb the names of the characters in SpongeBob or Paw Patrol or something like that, or they could learn, the timeline history, or they could learn, their math charts or things like that. But they're going to learn something, because when young children are at this stage, they really want to be focusing on the grammar of things. But as they get older, they kind of enter into that pert stage, the adolescence, where they're kind of barking back a little bit, and they're saying, well, Mom, why do I have to do what you say? And why is this the way it is? And why, they're saying, well, we had our memory work was something about the South American Revolution stuff. And my little Frederick, he was just happy to learn the sentence, but all of a sudden, my older 2, they're like, well, why were they having the revolution right then? And we said, well, what was going on in America at that time? What was going on in France at that time? So they're kind of wrestling through the ideas of, why is what I've learned true? Like, why did that happen? And then at some point when they get a little bit older, they're going to start they'll start wanting to express their ideas to others. And that's what's called the poetic stage, where they really want to be sharing their opinions. They want to stand up in front of people and let people know what they think. They don't want to just be told what to believe. They want to understand it and tell other people what they believe. So that's the basic classical model. And in CC, we use that through our foundations, essentials, and challenge programs. So each one of them looks very different as you're going through, because we're harnessing the way God designed students to learn at each different stage. So this is our challenge program scope and sequence, and we are at the end of the sequence with challenge 4 down there at the bottom. And that's where Carolyn's going to take over and give us her perspective.
Okay, so I've directed Challenge 4 3 times. The first 2 times, my own student was in the Challenge 4 program, and then I did it again with students that weren't mine. So maybe I can give you a little bit of parent perspective as well as director perspective. What I like about Challenge 4, one of the reasons I said it's one of the easiest, I think, challenge levels to direct is because so many of the strands are student led, and really you just get to show up each community day and have these really great conversations with these students, that maybe you know well or maybe you don't know well, but you're just having some really great conversations with them. So, of course, they're going to get to practice all the skills that they've had, learned through LTW as far as, what kinds of questions are good questions. And so I feel like they're just really putting all of that together as the students prepare to lead the various seminars. So I was going to go through the strands, each one. So with the logic strand, the students may be finishing up their advanced math book, which would be pre-calculus, or you may have a student or two that are doing calculus. But regardless of whether you're doing pre-calculus or calculus, what I found is that the students really are equipped at this stage to help one another. So if someone's showing up in the strand and maybe they're having some difficulty with the concept, all you have to do is get the conversation going, and there'll be another student there to help them work through whatever the issues or the problems are. And so by the time the strand is over, everybody's learned something. I learned something every week in the calculus or in the logic strand. Of course, they're very familiar with the Saxon book, and they're very used to self-teaching at this point. So really, they're self-teaching, and when they show up in community, they're teaching one another. So I think as a parent, I kind of worked with my own students through Algebra 2, so I had a pretty good math foundation, but I did fall off when it came to advanced math and calculus. I just, I didn't apply myself like I did with Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, but I just found that I could still lead and facilitate the class as they were self-teaching and teaching one another. So all right, in the grammar strand, of course, that's our Latin. First semester, you're translating some original documents, starting with the Vulgate, and then looking at some science documents, and then some fables and some stories. But what is interesting about the grammar strand is that, especially first semester, is we've been doing a lot of word for word translations with the Henley one and really even the Henley 2 to some extent. But now you're really going into a word for thought translation. So not only do you want to get the word for word correct, but then you're going to put it together so it sounds, beautiful and pleasing to read. And so that's what they're doing in Challenge 4 Latin. And just like Jerome translated the Vulgate, and of course, we know all of our different Bible translations that we have, especially if they are, going back to the original documents. Think about all the translations that we have when we're translating just the Bible. So the students are going to be doing that same thing. So it's fun just to see how they take this word for word and then create something that's nice and pleasant, to read out loud. So you're going from word for word to word for thought translations. And then second semester, we switch over to translating Virgil in the Henley 4. And we're doing that at the same time they're reading Virgil's Aeneid in the exposition strand. So really their reading of Virgil's Aeneid almost becomes like the answer key for what they're translating in the grammar strand. And in that one, if I've got a large class, then I'll assign various lines to the students. So everyone's not translating everything, but they're translating a portion of something. So that is the grammar or the Latin for Challenge 4. And again, it's we're translating in class, we're translating at home, and then we're sharing our results when we get into community. With physics, this is a strand that has changed, right? So we did Saxon physics all 3 times that I led Challenge 4. Of course, Krista will mention the new the new physics book when she gets to the book rep part. So for me, the physics was really a lot of applied math. And so I'll let her speak to that when she goes through the catalog. So um, I enjoyed the physics, but it's going to be different now. All right, the reasoning strand. Reasoning strand, first semester is the study of theology. So you're reading portions of the Old Testament. Again, this is a student-led strand, so they're coming to Community Day ready to discuss with their peers the passages that they've read. We're not going to read all of the Old Testament, but you're going to read key passages and then discuss those passages with those 5 common topic questions. And then we're also incorporating now the invitation to the Psalms. And for me, this book is a great follow-on to some of what we've done in previous strands, like analogies for all of us. And then when we would look at literary terms. So now we're still doing the same kinds of literary terms that we've done in exposition and some other strands, but we're applying them to the Psalms. We're applying them to Hebrew poetry. So that's a good strand. And then second semester, we spend the whole semester reading C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. And that's, your students are going to have some really great conversations as they read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. Let's see what else I had written down here. Okay. I think when I get to the end, I'll talk about the rhetorical assignments in each strand. I meant to do that as I went along. In the exposition strand, we're reading ancient literature. We start off with Hesiod's Theogony. We read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and then we read the Aeneid and Oedipus Rex. So just like in the strands that I've, like in the reasoning strand, that theme of leadership in Challenge 4, you're going to have some really good student-led discussions on leadership. And I think it's especially interesting as we compare the leaders in the leadership style and the actions of some of the leaders that we read about in ancient literature, and then compare those to the leaders that we're reading in the Old Testament. So that's the way that you'll be able to make a connection between the reasoning strand and the exposition strand as you look at the leadership of, say, Moses or Abraham compared to the leadership of those that we read about in ancient literature. In that strand, we use the Heroes of the City of Man as commentary. Your students will be familiar with that book, with the way that book is laid out, because we also used it in Challenge 3. So there'll be some commentary from a Christian perspective. There'll be some thought questions and some review questions. Your students can use this commentary as help for them as they prepare their own student-led discussion. They can use it kind of as a jumping off point, but that'll help them prepare for the discussion in the exposition strand. And then in the debate strand, we use The Discoverers by David Boorstin as we study world history. And for me, this is really like 4 books in one. The book is The Discoverers, but it's really a book on time, a book on geography, a book on science, and then a book on culture. So I thought this was a fascinating way to study world history, because they take each one of those big topics of time, geography, science, and culture, and they take it back to the very beginning of when man began contemplating time and contemplating exploration of the world through geography or map making. They take it back to the very beginning, and then they'll follow that theme or that idea up through the modern day. Another interesting thing about the Discoverers in the David Boorstin book is the students are going to spend time looking for biases from the author. The author's not a Christian, so it's not like in the Patriots history, you get a sense that he's delivering U.S. history from a Christian-friendly, conservative point of view. With David Boorstin, you're going to get something totally different. So the students spend some time, looking at the biases of the author and how that affects the way he's presenting the history. And then, okay, so before we get though to the senior thesis, let me go back through some of the seminars and talk about what some of the rhetorical assignments are. In the reasoning strand, the rhetorical assignments, the students are going to do an Old Testament speech the first semester, and then they do I think that, yeah, they do not an Old Testament speech, but they do kind of an apologetic speech or presentation second semester. You'll find that in Challenge 4, they're not writing a lot of papers in Challenge 4. Just like the seminars are student-led, there's a lot of oral presentations. Your students are writing papers maybe for college. They're doing college essays and other things like that. So really, there's not a lot of writing in Challenge 4. It's a lot of oral presentation, but they're using all of those skills that we use in preparing a paper in preparing their oral presentations. In the exposition strand, your students are going to be doing some dramatic presentations with each one of the books, just like they did with Shakespeare in Challenge 3. And then they'll do some oral presentations maybe at the end of each semester as they contemplate, what is leadership. And then in the debate strand, they do a critical book analysis first semester, and then they've got another oral presentation second semester. So I think you're going to find that in Challenge 4, it's a lot of student-led discussions, a lot of oral presentations. They're not writing a lot of papers. So, and then the last thing I would share is the capstone event for Challenge 4. Which is the senior thesis. Now, this is kind of like a semester long or really a year long project for the students, culminating with a presentation of their senior thesis at the end of the year. Here, they're using all 5 canons of rhetoric as they decide on a topic it's got to be a topic that they really enjoy, right? Because they're going to spend a lot of time with it. So it's going to be something that they really want to flesh out throughout the whole year. And then they're going to defend that in front of a panel of judges at the end of the year. So that's really a great capstone event for the seniors. And it's really a time of celebration as we really get to look at all the things that they've done their entire challenge career. And it just all comes together at that capstone event for their senior thesis. So, that's a little bit of my perspective on Challenge 4. Do you have any questions?
Well, I was thinking maybe we could, since we don't have a student on the call, but we have several moms who have students graduated from Challenge 4. And I was wondering if any of us that have graduates can remember some of the, like we can speculate on their perspective on this a little bit. From my part, I could talk about Reagan, her senior thesis. She found that to be a very important part of that year. She actually chose to, it was overly complicated at the beginning, but she was trying to say how War and Peace reflected feminist ideas. It was really kind of nebulous in the beginning, and she had to learn to hone that. She was actually wrestling a lot. This is 5 or 6 years ago now. There was a lot of that Me Too movement stuff going on. There was a lot of feminism that was very loud in the culture. It still is, but it was just very shrill at that time. And she was wrestling through some of these ideas. But at the same time, she had fallen in love with this book, War and Peace. And so she actually read Betty Friedan's book, some of those cornerstone feminists, like angry feminists. She read a lot of their books, and then she was trying to discuss what biblical feminism would be, or femininity, versus what the feminist movement said. And she was using War and Peace somehow. I forget how she wove that in there, but it was so important for her to culminate her own ideas, and she wanted to express things, kind of like that poetic stage where you know, they are in that poetic stage, which is she wanted to express what she thought about it. She was tired of kind of hearing what she should think, both from the culture or even from church, what she was being told. And she wanted to kind of fuse that and be able to express her voice on that. And so, challenge 4, I think some people feel like there's not a lot going on, but to my daughter, it was a very important year of being able to express herself in all the subjects and all the strands. And she felt like she had some of her students that she'd gone through many years with, they ended up not going to challenge 4. And so her class was kind of smaller because some people felt like, well, there's not much going on. But Reagan felt like it was very different from her perspective. There was a lot of like fusing of all the CC things together. Like challenge 4 was the capstone of all these capstones that had come before in each of the levels. So that was just her perspective on it. So if anyone else has wants to maybe comment on how their students felt about challenge 4 when they went through it. Jennifer, I know you've got a challenge 4 graduate, right?
I have one. My other two sons did not do challenge 4 because they started challenge late, and there really wasn't a 4 for them to go to when they did get there. The one who did really enjoyed it. But I don't remember. It's been that was in 2019. That was a while back. And so I'm trying to remember details. We were talking the other day about his senior thesis. We were talking about me going into challenge 4 with our youngest next year. And we were talking about his senior thesis and what he wrote about. He focused on his thesis was on the U.S. entering World War II and when we did and why we waited and all those kind of things. And it's, in talking to him the other day, he said he really wanted to go back and look at his paper again and see if his views have changed in the years that he was in the military now. You know, would he say the same things, or would he change his perspective now on what he said back then? But it was one of his favorite years. I do remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I hear that over and over again. There are some parents that are like, it doesn't feel like there's much going on. But to the students, there's a lot going on internally where they get to. It's directing. I think the program, they're gonna express themselves about something. I mean, you see all these students that go on to like that when they get to college, and then all of a sudden that's where campus riots happen and people do protests and things like that. Because students want to express themselves. They're at that point where they want to say, I have an opinion about these things now. But they're either gonna practice, they're either going to give a perspective of anger, or we can help train them into discussing ideas in a way that is productive, honing their thoughts, helping them to develop a voice that is worth sharing. And that's what I feel like this level is so good at doing. But there's just not a lot of books that reflect what's going on all in here, because it's not a very curriculum heavy. Because the curriculum, we have books, but the curriculum is really the discussion, and is really what, like Carolyn is facilitating when she's directing Challenge 4. The discussion is the curriculum. So, all right, well, I'm going to go through book rep perspective a little bit. So we're going to look at if you guys have your catalogs, you could follow along with me, or this is where my tech experience gets really clunky and not so good. So a lot of times when I try to switch between my screens, something gets lost. I have a child upstairs getting dramatic. I hope my husband knows that he's supposed to be watching the kids. Well, he'll find out now. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the slide. And we're going to move over to the catalog, maximize that. This is actually an improvement over the way I used to do this, but it's still kind of clunky. We're all just homeschool moms trying to figure this stuff out, right? I don't work for Microsoft. So, all right. Can you guys see the screen I'm looking at with the catalog?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So one of the things I wanted to kind of show you about when you do the online catalog, and maybe some of you moms know this, that you can find these other places. But if there's any of these Cultivating Christian Leaders resources, like Abolition of Man, there's Listening for Heaven's Sake. If you click on some of these, it's not this one. This isn't a good example. If you click on that, you scroll down, it'll take you to a link where there's like a dialectic discussion of several people who've read this book, and Lee Bortons is on the call too. And they discuss, it's about 45 minutes to an hour where they kind of say what they got out of the book. And it kind of can give you a little teaser into saying, okay, is this worth me investing in? Or is this something that I could really just watch the video and feel like I got something out of? Like, so there's a couple, sometimes I listen to these and I feel good to go. And I, especially with like the Challenge A literature, that watching one of those has helped facilitate my discussing things with my son, like about Amos Fortune. And so I don't need to necessarily read the whole book with him, or if I've read it in the past with my oldest, I can listen to that. But it's been a while and I'm not going to go back and read the book. I can listen to that to jog my memory to kind of have a discussion. Now, Listening for Heaven's Sake is the reason why we have that here in the Challenge 4 level. It is really important for all the upper challenges, but since the kids are in this poetic, expressive stage, it is so important for us as parents to be ready to listen at this point, because we've been spending, 18 years talking to them and telling them things and training them in the way they ought to go. But now we need to kind of step back and allow them to express. And there's some interesting things with my daughter. There were certain subjects that she had some misunderstandings about my expectations for her, or God's expectations of her, that were that she had gotten somewhere along the way, but I hadn't heard her express back to me yet. And so I didn't realize that she had some really profound misunderstandings of some important things about her identity in Christ and her relationship as my daughter. But as she got into round in Challenge 4, I started trying to listen more and draw her out. And it really helped me see her heart better. And we were able to iron out some of those misunderstandings. And if we hadn't done that, if I hadn't been willing to stop and listen, I never would have found out some of those things. There was a reason why she was struggling with feminism. And she really needed the chance to be heard and for me to listen. And so this Listening for Heaven's Sake, I would say I have not read through it, but a lot of the principles in it I got from some other people who told me about it. And I really think that is an important thing as parents, that we are ready to listen to our kids at this stage. So Angels in the Architecture is another book this is one I've been wanting to read, but haven't gotten there yet. It's kind of following along with how it's kind of like, if anybody's read the Saving Leonardo books, it's about how art or philosophy is expressed in art. And we have a culture that is built on the foundations of a Christian worldview. So like Notre Dame is fully expressing a Christian worldview. And now we are in a secular culture. And what does that mean? How is our culture being expressed nowadays? So anyway, those are just some interest. And most people are familiar with Heroes of the City of Man. All right, so most of our materials at this point are pretty basic, so I'm not going to run through them, line item. I do want to spend a good bit of time talking about this Calculus for Everyone. Now, I haven't had my training fully on it, but I've been reading up on it a bit. There is an email that got sent out in response to a lot of parent questions. So it was asked, why is CC making this change after so many years of using Saxon physics? Why are we changing? So I'm just going to read the statement that was put out about this. It says, Classical Conversations considers 3 aspects when changing a curriculum: how we can make it more Christian, how we can make it more classical, and how we can make it more doable for a homeschool family. Prior to the Enlightenment, math, philosophy, and science were studied together. And we want to repair that divide. It's going back to that classical model of all these subjects are interrelated, and we're trying to bring that back in. Calculus for Everyone offers a holistic view of math and science. Quoting from the author's preface, we often try to beat secular scientists at their own game, playing science by their rules. Even many creation scientists fall into this trap. One of the main solutions for all this is a course or 2 in the philosophy of science, and in particular, the integrated history of philosophy, science, and mathematics. So that's what they're trying to attempt to bring into this. This book is not a dry text. It is very conversational. And it is, even though it's called Calculus is for Everyone, it is about physics. Some of the students will be studying calculus on their own through Saxon, or they might be in advanced mathematics. But a lot of the principles that they're talking about in Calculus for Everyone is applying those mathematical principles that they're learning to the field of physics. And there is a lot of discussion about history and the philosophy of science in this. So my daughters kind of looked over this. I actually saw this a few years ago in the Roman Roads at the homeschool convention at the Roman Roads booth. It was flipping through it. I'm like, oh, this is so awesome. I want to buy this for me. But man, wouldn't it be great if CC picked it up? And then they did. And so I think this is a great change. I know my daughter, when she went through this, I was disappointed with how she lacked interest in physics when it was the Saxon physics book. And she has since looked at this book on her own and is very excited. And she's learned, this is the way she's learning in the classical school she's going to. She is learning about physics now, and she is much more excited because they're doing it in the holistic integrated approach where they're talking about science, the philosophy of science, and how math and science integrate. And it's much more exciting and vibrant to her. So I think this is a real blessing to our program. Let's see. So then we could go to some of these other ones. Invitation to Psalms, Carolyn mentioned. This is, I have heard this expressed as it kind of teaches you the tools for studying the Bible on multiple levels. So it's getting Bible study kind of into a, how to do more than just like read a commentary, or how to just, like the light, fluffy devotional type stuff. This is how do I look at it as literature? How do I look at it as poetry? But also, how do I look for God in it? And how do I find Christ in the Old Testament? So it kind of it encourages the students to go a little deeper than what they might be getting through the average youth group program that they're in, or even in the modern adult church at times. Mere Christianity, a lot of you are familiar with this. This is actually the book that made me, that started the process of me coming to Christ. So and my daughter has reread it many times. And it's been very pivotal to her developing secular relationships and drawing others to Christ. The Discoverers, Carolyn talked about that for a good bit. This is actually a part of a 3-book series that at some point I'm going to read this myself. But the 3-book series, my daughter ended up asking for as her graduation present, and she went and read through the rest of these. So this really is. And I've heard this is one of the favorite books of kids who have graduated from this program. They often go back and say, oh, that Discoverers book, it really fused the ideas of CC. So even the students that don't get a chance to make it through all the way to Challenge 4 for whatever reason, handing them this book, if you could just hand them this book, I think it would be very powerful to helping them integrate their ideas about math and science and philosophy and culture. And he does it in a very fascinating way of approaching how humans have tried to measure time. I didn't understand it initially until my daughter tried to explain it a little bit better, but it's really a fascinating way to tackle that subject. Carolyn, do you feel like that it's important for students to have the particular versions that we offer of like the Iliad, the Odyssey?
Yes, I do. So if it says use the Fagles, I mean, there's other translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Aeneid, but if it says use Fagles, then I would use Fagles. If it says use Fitzgerald, use Fitzgerald. Because the line numbers are going to match up on, on the poetry, on the book.
Now,
So,
why is that important?
well, if you can't say go to page number so and so, you at least need to be able to say go to book line 320. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
like they're divided up into books instead of chapters, book 1, book 2. So if you can't say go to this page, you need to say go to book 1, line number whatever, and
Okay.
you'll all be on the same place then.
Okay, so it keeps the class moving, instead of people
Yes.
fumbling around trying to find each other's places. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And
I
so,
mean, I've had students with other translations, and it just makes it difficult. It slows the conversation down if you're
Okay.
trying to all read the same passage.
okay. So it's the most efficient use of everyone's time in class, because you only get an hour a week for each strand. So
Right.
you don't want to clog up the gears, fumbling around with pages. Okay. And then Heroes of the City of Man. Do you feel like that gives parents, like if the parents can't read all the books, if they could just go through Heroes of the City of Man with their students, does that kind of help them
Yes.
kind of keep
Yeah.
pace with their students a bit so they can be more involved?
Yes. So, it's really great commentary. It moves you through the book at the same pace that the students are going through the book. So if you
Okay.
can't read the books alongside with them, you can read the Heroes of the City of Man and still have good conversation.
Okay. All right. So that's in this program, or at this level, it really isn't a book heavy. It's not really book heavy or curriculum heavy at this level. You do have calculus for everyone, and your math texts are, those are pretty weighty. But at this level, the main curriculum is the discussion. So, all right, well, let me go ahead and stop sharing that. So we're just going to go into, I'm not going to try to reshare that other thing. Oh, I do need to go back onto the PowerPoint though, because I want to give you guys the discount code for this quarter. So in the meantime, parents, do you guys have any questions either for Carolyn or Fry? Or me? Oh my goodness, Carolyn or me? I still diagram things in my mind sometimes. I'm like, is that the direct object or is it the subject? We just did such a good job, Carolyn. They don't have any questions.
Heroes, is that one that we use in class as well, or is it just supplemental? Like, is it helpful or is it one of the required ones?
I think it's required. I think it's one of
Okay.
those that's gray or whatever in the catalog. It's more than just supplemental. And I think the students will rely on it somewhat as they prepare to lead discussion. I found that most of my students did refer or rely on it as they prepared discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is listed in the catalog as being not optional. So my daughter took it to school with her too. So I have to buy a new copy in a few years because she took like all the like I think it's challenge 1, 2. Yeah, I think all the upper challenges, she took all her books and I have to buy all new copies. But she marked them up so heavily. I mean, I guess she should have them anyway. So she was definitely. Do you, Carolyn, do you encourage your students to write a lot in their Iliad? Do you encourage them to take notes in there?
Yeah, I do. So I'd love to show you like the copies of my exposition books. It's I mean, they're written all over the place, and some of it might be remarks even from the Heroes of the City of Man. Maybe I'm going to write that question, that discussion, or that thought question in the margin, or sometimes I'll make my own I'll be creating my own little commentary in the margins. And so the students were doing that also. Yeah, we wrote a lot in those books.
Okay. Okay. And we found these little things called, they're not bookmarks, but they're called like book darts, I think. And they're like they're very thin, and they just, you can only like from the side of the book, you just see like a little dash, and it's a little piece of metal, like aluminum or something, that just kind of folds over the page. And she would use those if she didn't want to dog ear her books. And so a lot of her books, if you look at the sides, you see all these little darts going along the sides, and then she would be able to flip open in class and make notes on it. So all right, well, if there's no more questions, I'll kind of run through the conclusion here. So we still have more February Frenzy events that are going on for each level. This is the last one for Challenge 4. And then coming in March, April, and probably May too, we're going to do the Math Map at Home for parents that have younger students or who are going through Challenge A and B, just showing how we can use that program at home. Because last year we talked a lot about the lofty vision behind Math Map, but now we want to show parents like what do they do when they're actually sitting around a table with a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old. So, and the parent practicum will be coming up. You want to make sure you're registering for that. And then aside from that, a lot of you are directors, and I just want Melissa King was kind of encouraging me to encourage you folks that as part of inviting families into your community, that you might want to consider encouraging them to book some time with me to make sure that they're getting the right curriculum for each level. So we have a lot of parents scrambling in August and in September, realizing they didn't order all their materials, or especially when second semester comes around, they're like, oh, I didn't get all that stuff I was supposed to. And I can hopefully kind of help them with a little confusion they have about that, and also help them figure out ways that they can save money on things. Because I do have like discounts and sales and things like that I can kind of help with them. So on behalf of the CC Bookstore staff, we just want to thank everyone for supporting what we're doing, because we're Amazon can ship your items in 24 hours and have them back to your house. But, it takes us a little bit longer, but we are real humans that benefit from you guys working through the bookstore. So just want to thank you on behalf of the bookstore staff. So if nobody else has any questions, did everybody get that discount code on that one page?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, you guys have a great February day, and just remember the flowers are working under the surface. They're not showing yet, but they're doing that early work to get ready for April. So you guys all have a good Saturday. So,
Thanks,
Thank you.
Krista.
thank you.
Thank you, Krista.
Yep, my pleasure.